Stuart Strorley for Sailing World Magazine. Welcome back to our continuing America's Cup World Series interview series from the America's Cup World Series in Newport. Standing next to me, as many of you know, is Dean Barker, the skipper of Emirates Team New Zealand. Dean, you've now had 6 events with the America's Cup World Series 45, the AC 45. How comfortable are you guys sailing this boat?
It's amazing how quickly you sort of feel that you become more comfortable with these boats, and you learn more about how they behave, the characteristics, when you're close to the edge, when you're maybe sort of pushing it a little bit too hard. But and along with that, it's also about trying to get faster and faster, because as any one design, everyone's sort of pushing just to make improvements, however big or small, along the way, and trying to stay at the head of the fleet is very difficult.
We know initially that there was quite a bit of carryover for a team that had never used a wing before, looking toward the 72. At this stage, are you still learning things in this series that can apply to the 72, or has that time passed and then that learning curve in particular flattened out?
The learning curve in terms of what applies to the 72 is definitely flattened out with these boats. They're a good modern design, but they could be a lot better again if we chucked a few different bits and pieces on them. But in terms of where these are really useful, it's developing the race skills, learning about the race course, reaching starts, all the good things we have to look forward to in San Fran.
Let's look forward to that reaching start. One of the many innovative features of the America's Cup World Series and the AC 34 is the reaching start. How much have you learned? How much have your philosophies on how you approach that start changed since the first race back in Cascais, nearly 11 months ago?
The biggest difference between then and now is that we probably have a little bit more of an idea of what we're trying to do on the start. Back then it was sort of, just let it rip and see what happens. But now it feels like there's a lot more refinement in actually the starting techniques and what you're looking to try and achieve in a certain situation. Understanding the pros and cons of different manoeuvres and how to deal with different situations. And really only through doing enough practice against these other teams is the only way really forward. And we feel like we're making improvements, but still a long way to go.
What are some of the things, I imagine that the fleet as a whole has come to some general realizations about the start? What are some of the kind of the bedrock philosophies of doing the reaching start? What are some of the things you have to do right?
I think the most important thing is hitting the line with pace as best you can. Fleet races, the boats tend to probably rack up fairly close to the line, so that there can be an opportunity to come roaring through right at the last few seconds and get a really nice slingshot start. But in general, you have to sort of fight your way around the start line until you find a nice gap. You have to protect it very hard, much like any sort of other racing, but then you have to time your trigger pull really well so that you just get a little bit of a momentum on the guys around you, so you can pop off the line. So executing a lot of little things well is very important.
Yeah, it's amazing. You mentioned pulling the trigger on these boats, of course. Missing it by 5 seconds means you're either 3 lengths behind the line or 3 lengths over the line. I mean, the acceleration is so phenomenal and the boats go so fast that if you're a little bit late or a little bit early, people are wondering what you're thinking.
Yeah, I know, and it's literally sort of half a second here or there can be the difference between having a good start and a shocker. And the boats accelerate so quickly that you just mistime that a little bit. You just don't get your bow down enough to accelerate. And next thing you do find yourself stuck back in the group a bit.
Let's look at that perspective. Damage control in these boats when you don't have a good start, which happens to everyone, and you have kind of a short reach into a bareway, and then you've got sometimes a shorter run, sometimes a full length run. What is the recovery mode? How do you guys get yourself on the path to getting back into a fleet race after you've had a bad start?
Well, it's hard because the nature of this racing is that really whoever gets around that first mark in good shape onto the downwind, they typically have enough to extend, and unless they make a silly mistake, they should lead around the bottom gate. Second and third normally are not too bad either. They normally can get out of dodge, but after that, when you're back in the pack, if you're sort of 4th through 8th, it's all on, and you have to just look for the opportunities to try and turn a bad result, a 6th or a 7th, into a 3rd or a 4th if you can. It's very hard to turn a bad start into a win, just because the boats are well sailed and the leaders do tend to get away a little bit. But if you can end up with a 2nd or a 3rd, you've had an absolute, a really good race.
And that's something we've seen you guys do countless times, which of course is why you've done so well in the fleet racing, is you've been able to get those 6 or 7s and make them 3rds or 4ths, which, as anyone knows in fleet racing, often it's not necessarily how many races you win often, but how many races you don't lose or don't do poorly in.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing is that, I think consistency-wise, it feels like we've been probably one of the more consistent teams during the World Series, but the different events. But so much weighting goes onto that final race on the Sunday that you can be consistent, and it keeps you in the mix and gives you a good opportunity going into the last race. But it still comes down to a one race, winner-take-all final, and so you just got to make sure you're in contention going into that last day, which we have each time. But nailing that last race is it's a difficult thing to do, because the standard's very high. You've got 8 teams which are all capable of winning the race, and all sort of fighting for by Sunday what is probably quite a well-known race course. So it's very difficult.
You mentioned the well-known race courses, and while the structure and layout of the race courses has been fairly similar, I guess Venice would be an exception given it was fairly unique there. But the length and width of the courses has been fairly similar across the venues. What makes each course unique, and what sort of things are you learning throughout the week that maybe you're filing away in the memory bank?
Well, for here in Newport, it's a great race course area where we're sailing up and down outside Fort Adams. The current is definitely a big player here. You have to really have your head around what that's doing, the different stages of the tide cycle. So that proves a challenge. Understanding a little bit how the breeze operates. You get down sort of just beyond Fort Adams to where the bottom gate will be. It's breeze typically is a lot lighter down there, so you have to factor that into how you race the boat and your settings and everything else. And it's got a lot of elements which are going to have to be balanced up to have a good result. And bearing in mind all this training that we're doing now, we're sailing in a strong outgoing tide. Come race time, we're probably dealing with a strong incoming. So it'll be still lots to learn as the racing goes on.
Let's look ahead. As Ray mentioned, you guys have maybe another month or so before you put your 72 in the water. What's your level of anxiety or enthusiasm or for getting that boat in the water and going sailing?
Definitely anxious, nervous, I suppose. But you're dealing with a very serious piece of equipment, and things can go wrong. We've seen Artemis already have had a major setback when they broke their wing, and it's a real wake-up call for all the teams that things can and will go wrong, and it's how well that team can bounce back at any given sort of setback. And you just hope that more than anything that the boat gets back to the dock every day in one piece.
One quick question. I know there's not too many details you're going to give us, but do you think this is going to be a wheel or a tiller boat for you?
We'll see.
We'll see. All right. Every detail is being kept hidden. Let's look ahead to the America's Cup World Series here. Look at the match racing, where Artemis has been very successful. What is different about the match racing and the fleet racing that maybe has made the results a little bit more disparate than maybe we would have expected?
The format that we've sort of adopted in the last 2 or 3 events, where we've sort of gone into this quarterfinal knockout stage from very early on, it's meant you've had to be on your game. We raced Terry in Naples. We were top qualifier, top seed going into the match racing after the fleet racing portion, and then he came in as 8th qualifier, and we lost that sudden death race to him, and that handed us 8th place for that event. So it sort of felt like a pretty tough sort of format, really, or formula, to think you go in as top seed, you lose one race and you come 8th. So it's that was difficult to swallow. So that sort of has really hurt us. But in saying that, the format encourages you to win races, and if you win races, well, you'll do well. And then in Venice they modified it a little bit. Again, we raced Terry in the quarters and we lost to them there, but it was a best of 3, so it sort of made it a little bit better. But still, you turn up at these events, you do. For us, we did the 2 races and that was it. So we don't really feel like we're getting a lot of race practice in the match racing, but if we sail well, we'll get more practice. So it's sort of a little bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. Looking at the match racing, I think one of the knocks on catamarans was they're not going to be maneuverable enough to really, and see that pre-start dial up all that exciting action we were used to with the ACC boats. I don't suspect that's the case. I think you probably guys have found these to be a little bit more maneuverable than many people expected. What about you? Do you think that these things are a little bit shiftier than people would have anticipated, and we'll see some back and forth action in the pre-start?
Yeah, I think we won't see as much action in the pre-start as what we've seen before, because the pre-starts are much shorter, down to 2 minutes as opposed to the 5 that we're used to. So you're not going to have the same circling, the same amount of action as what we've seen in the past. But where it is exciting is when the boat's in that final sort of 30, 40 seconds where they start to interact a little bit. There's plenty of sort of different moves or different ideas, that people are trying and experimenting with, and you can definitely take control of your opponent in the pre-start if you do a good job of it. So you are trying to learn, understand all that. I think it's probably the penalty for having a bad start is a lot less in this reaching type environment, because you naturally don't start off more than maybe 1 or 2 lengths behind, so you are still in the race, but it is very, very difficult to pass, as we've seen.
Yeah. The wing in that sense is a powerful tool because it's rigid and you can kind of throw it around. It gives you a certain amount of maneuverability that maybe you didn't have with the old boats.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of tricks to dealing with the wing. We're still learning all the time, and there's definitely gains to be had in knowing how to deal with the wing and controlling it and everything else. So there's a lot of options in the pre-start which you wouldn't normally have with a soft sail boat.
Oracle Racing Spithill, Oracle Team USA Spithill, they took over the overall lead in the fleet racing from you in the last event. Can you get it back in this event?
Yeah, definitely. We've been sailing well right from Cascais, and I think each event that we've been to, there's always been one team that sort of stepped up more than they may have in previous events, and it's sort of really a bit of a game of snakes and ladders at the moment, where different teams are stepping up at different times, and I think the level throughout the fleet is progressing. And you just want to be the one that takes that sort of the step as you go into that next event, so you put yourself in a position above everyone else. And it's not easy to do. It's there's a lot of very good sailors here, and everyone's working hard. Teams that have got the 2 boats, well, they have a big advantage in that they can check in with a lot of different settings and speed test and race and do everything else. So we have to try and rely on the limited amount of practice we do to really understand the boats to take it to that next level. So at times it's a bit frustrating, but we really enjoy coming here and doing the racing.
And if Team New Zealand weren't an underdog, what would you guys do?
Yeah, well, it's nice. We've got to keep focusing on the important thing, and that's next year. This is really, it's still very new for us. We're only 18 months into our multi-hull lives, and it's very cool still. It's still a novelty. It will be a novelty for quite a lot longer as the 72 comes online, but at the same time, it's incredible yachting. You come in smiling pretty much every day you go out there, because you're not only you're learning something, but you're also normally having pretty good adrenaline buzz at the same time. So that in itself is very cool. You do miss the monohulls every now and then, because it did offer something quite different, but we're enjoying what we're doing at the moment.
All right, well, here's to you guys having a nice combination of both the buzz and the satisfaction of doing well here in Newport.
Well, thanks
for your time, Dean.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.